All right, well, let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 19. Genesis 19. I love this Sunday school time. I remember there was a guy in South Carolina. His name was John Roseborough. He's now passed on to glory. But he said that Sunday school ought to be exactly that. It ought to be Sunday school. And what he meant by that is we ought to be just learning the Bible in Sunday school. And that's what we try to do during our Sunday school class here at Calvary. So Genesis chapter 19, we've seen the destruction of Sodom and how that God sent two angels into Sodom and delivered just Lot. Now he was just, he was justified, he was righteous in the eyes of God, but there was a lot about his life that just wasn't right with God. But anyway, so after some encouragement, some nudging you might say, and some pulling, the angels got Lot out of Sodom in time for the destruction to come down. And we looked last time at Lot's wife and how she looked back, and how that in the Gospels there's a very sober reminder from our Lord, and that is, remember Lot's wife, and that if you seek to gain your life, you will lose it, and if you lose your life, you will gain it unto life eternal, which means that if you live for yourself in this world and the things this world can give you, you're going to lose it. You'll lose it all. But if you live for Christ and for his kingdom, then that's something that's eternal. And Lot's wife was living for this world. She looked back, and whatever that means, we don't know exactly what that means, but it says she turned into a pillar of salt. And so that's a pretty bad thing for her. All right, verse number 27. We have all this taking place, the fire, the brimstone coming down from heaven. And it says here, and Abraham gat up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in the which Lot dwelt. And so what we see here is confirmation of the fact that Abraham's prayer for the righteous in Genesis 18, 23 through 32 had been answered by Lot being spared. And this is something that's a conviction to us. You know, God tells Abraham, I am going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. And what's the first thing that Abraham thinks about? He thinks about his nephew Lot. And he prays for the righteous people in those cities. Will you spare it for 50 and all the way down to 10? And God says, I will spare them for 10. But I think what we see here is confirmation in verse number 29 that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. Because of the prayers of Abraham, Lot was spared the judgment that came upon Sodom. And you try to reconcile God's sovereignty with man's free will, but the fact of the matter is that God spared Lot because of the prayers of Abraham. And so, that's a challenge to us as we think about faithful Abraham. We need to not fail to pray for others that God would spare them from judgment. God is warning us in the Scriptures about an eternal lake of fire, that those whose names are not found written in the book of life will be cast into the lake of fire. So those that we know are not saved, we need to be praying for them, that they will be spared the judgment to come. And God hears and answers these sort of prayers. Those who we know are Christians, who are out there living in the world, headed in the wrong direction, not being obedient to our Lord, we know the judgment that comes upon those who are disobedient. And we need to be praying for those Christians, that God would bring them out of whatever that is that they find themselves in. And so Abraham, a model of prayer, and we see here the fact that God, when it's according to his will, he hears and he answers that prayer. So anyway, that's kind of a neat thing. All right, verse 30, it says here, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. After seeing what God had done to the other cities of the plain, Lot leaves Zoar, and he moves into a cave. And by the way, in case you don't remember, this is exactly what God instructed him to do originally. Look back at verses 17 through 22. It says, and it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, oh, not so, my lord. Behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight. Thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. Behold now, this city is near to flee unto. It's a little one. Let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar, or the word Zoar means little. All right, so we see here this city, which came to be known as Zoar, was spared because of Lot's sake. But we see at the end of the day, God had said to Lot to go where? To flee for his life. Well, not just the caves, but the mountains. Go to the mountains and flee for your life. And Lot said, I don't want to live in the mountain. Well, he ended up in the city of Zoar, and I don't know. Maybe the people in Zoar felt like he was bad luck, and they were like, get out of here. Or maybe he saw what happened to the other cities, and he was afraid God might do it to Zoar since they were just as wicked. But whatever the reason was, Lot ended up exactly where God told him to go in the first place. And that's the way it is with a lot of us. You know, we know what God wants us to do, and if we're a Christian, God is leading us in the right direction. And the best thing to do is to go the first time and not make God make it miserable on us and do it the second or third time when God calls us. So here he is, going to the mountain exactly where God had said to go. Any comments or questions on Abraham's prayer or the fact that he ended up in the mountains? All right. The Bible is very explicit in some places, and this is one of those places in the Bible. Verse number 31. His 2 daughters, remember? The firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And so this is a very wicked thing here. And when the law is given, this is expressly forbidden. But even at this point, it was expressly forbidden. And that is that these 2 daughters were going to have relations with their father in order to have children, because they knew that no men would want them at this point. And probably they thought all the eligible men had been burned up in the fire. They weren't thinking about marrying someone godly. They were just thinking about all the men they knew, and they're never going to have another boyfriend. They're never going to get married. And, you know, this is one of those things, when you get in that frantic sort of mindset, you do stupid stuff. And that's exactly what they're about to do. But this is the second mention of drunkenness in the Bible. If you remember, drunkenness ruined what man and his posterity? Noah, that's right. Noah. So he started to plant a vineyard, and he grew the grapes, and he fermented the grapes, and he got drunk, and nobody really knows exactly what the sin was there, but it says that his nakedness was exposed, and his posterity through Ham and then through Canaan was cursed was cursed because of this drunkenness and the foolish things that happened due to Noah being drunk. Well, we see here once again drunkenness again, and it's not only going to ruin Noah, but it also is going to ruin Lot and his posterity. And so we have to understand, in our society today, people say, well, God would have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah if he didn't destroy our society. But believe it or not, the morals of our society can go even lower than what they are today. And I see things in my mind that could take place in our country that go even more downward than what we experience today. And I believe in Sodom, they had reached the bottom of the barrel. So Sodom was a place where anything goes. So these two daughters, let's just read it in the text, verse 33 and following. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father, let us make him drink wine this night also. Go thou in, lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. Anything goes. That's the motto of Sodom. And so these two daughters of Lot get their daddy drunk. And some practical warnings. If someone is continually buying you drinks, alcoholic drinks, it's not because they want to be nice to you. It's most likely because they want to get you not thinking straight so they can do something bad to you, okay? And the best thing to do is to stay away from it totally. But I'm just warning you, can I buy you a drink? And I just figured this out recently. There's some things I've been reading about instances of abuse. That's one of the first things that an abuser will do to you in many cases. And that is to start saying, hey, have some alcohol. You're a grown-up person. You can handle it. You think, oh, he thinks I'm a grown-up. I can handle it. Yeah, no. Just say no. And my advice is just say no to the whole stuff. I remember Brother Raymond was saying his brother would drink before he was a Christian. And he'd get mad and get into fights and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it is not good. My daddy did the same thing. That's how it affected him, as when he would be on a drunk, as they would say here in this area. So, listen, this is a tool of the devil to get you to lower your inhibitions, to not think straight, and to be manipulated by someone else. So if someone, and that's, you say, well, why do they serve drinks in casinos? Why do they serve drinks in the casinos on these cruise ships? Well, because when you're not thinking straight, you're more likely to spend more of your money. I mean, this is a tool of the devil. And so just be aware, if someone offers you a drink, especially young ladies, if it's a boy or a man, it is a red flag that he is wanting to do something to you that you will not recover from apart from God's grace and a lot of time. But anyway, so this is what they do to their dad. They each are impregnated by their father, which is incest, which is sin. And in their minds, their warped, Sodom-filled minds, they now will have a baby, and now they'll have someone to take care of them. They will have a man to take care of them. So anyway, let's see what these babies are going to turn out to be. Verses 37 and 38, Genesis 19. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. And you say, well, why is this incident even mentioned? Why are the names of these children mentioned? Because as you study the history of the Bible, the Moabites and the Ammonites became a very wicked people. These are the ones sacrificing their little babies. These are the ones participating in all kinds of immorality. And anyway, we do see from, the Moabites, Ruth, right? She was a Moabite. And so we do see God's grace, working among individuals within the Moabites. And God's grace and salvation and forgiveness was extended to individual Moabites. But as a race, as a people, the Moabites and the Ammonites were very wicked. And you see the decision of Lot earlier in the book of Genesis to separate from the man of God, separate from the people of God. The decision of Lot to pitch his tent toward Sodom. The decision of Lot to marry, probably, a girl from the city of Sodom. To move into Sodom. To become a leader in Sodom. To raise his family in Sodom. Without having anything to do with the people of God, which is Abraham, the prophet, the priest in that time. You see the effects. His posterity are a bunch of heathens who know nothing about God, with the exception of people like Ruth, who individually turned from their sin and trusted the God of the Bible. Any comments or questions? That one decision to separate from the people of God, that one decision to pitch your tent toward Sodom, that one decision to marry the wrong person who's not a believer, that one decision to move into Sodom, that one decision to become just a part of the leadership in Sodom, all of this destroyed Lot, not his soul, because he was a child of God, but destroyed Lot personally, destroyed his family, and destroyed his posterity for all of eternity. Especially these young people. Be careful of the decisions you make. One decision, it may not seem like a big decision, just a little fork in the road. But I like to say, you point that finger out, they end up in totally different places. Seek the Lord. Stay close to God and his people. Be in his word. Pray. Fellowship with him. Find someone, if God calls you to be married, who's a Christian. These are all important decisions you're making. And one little decision in the wrong way, it can't take away your salvation, but it can mess up your life. So, any other thoughts as we are about to leave Lot and talk about imperfect Abraham? Anyone else? Anyone? Okay. Chapter 20. I think there was a popular song back in the 90s when I was younger, and it was by, I think it was Britney Spears. And I remember the title just hit me. I don't even know what the song sounds like, but I think the title was Oops, I Did It Again. I think she was the one saying it. It may have been someone else saying it. Oops, I did it again. And I thought, what an appropriate song for this next chapter, coming up with Abraham. Let's look at verse number 1 and verse number 2. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "Oh, not again. She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Oh, where did this happen before in Abraham's life? Egypt. I almost gave you the answer, didn't I? Back in chapter 12, verses 10 through 13. And the Egyptians were pagan people, and Sarah at that time was younger, and she was a very beautiful woman. And Abraham pulled the same thing. And the judgment of God fell on the Egyptians because they took Sarah into his harem, or one of the Pharaoh's officials took her in. And anyway, judgment came on the Egyptians, and eventually they paid off Abraham and said, "Get out of here. We don't want you bringing any more judgment of God upon us." But Abraham, he Why didn't he learn, right? He did this before in Egypt, and now he's doing it in the land of Abimelech, king of Gerar. But you know what? The thing is, how often do we make the same bad decisions over and over and over again? And God is showing us that if this man of faith, the father of the faithful, Abraham, can fall into the trap of making the same bad decisions, sinful decisions, over and over and over again, let us take heed lest we think we stand, lest we fall. Oh, I'd never do that. I'd never do that. Really? Really? Whenever we say something like that, I'd never do that. I think that the demonic forces around us hear that, and they take it to their higher-ups and say, that's a challenge. That's a challenge right there. He just said, I'll never do that. Let's see what we can do to manipulate things so he doesn't. And by God's grace, you can overcome any temptation. He always makes that way of escape. In 1 Corinthians 10:13. He always, through the Holy Spirit, gives us the power to overcome that temptation. But oops, Abraham's about to do it again. And so let's go down to verse number 3. Abimelech has taken Sarah into his harem, and she must have been a beautiful lady at this point. She was 89 years old. So, I mean, she must have been an outstandingly beautiful woman for her age. It says in verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nature? Said he not unto me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, to Abimelech, yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. In other words, I did not allow you to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet. He shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning. He wasn't going to mess with God. And called all his servants, and told all these things in their ears. And the men were sore afraid. Here's the grace of God here in verse number 6. God says, I have withheld thee from sinning against me. You know, we have our testimony time on Sunday night, and that may not be an appropriate time to share some of the things like this. But how many times has God protected us from sinning against him and bringing his judgment upon ourselves? How many times? I can think in my life of times when God has supernaturally swooped in and through circumstances kept me from doing wrong. And you know what? That's only out of his mercy and out of his grace. And that's what he's doing to Abimelech here. He is swooping in and he's saying, you're a dead man. What do you mean? I didn't know that she was married to him. Well, I have kept you from sinning against me and bringing on judgment. And we see here also, it says here about Abraham, that he is a what? Prophet. That's right. Abraham is a prophet. And this is the principle of the first mention. It's the first mention of the word prophet in the scriptures. Who is a prophet? I'm not going to go through and give a bunch of scriptures here, but a prophet does two things. Number one, he is someone who declares God's truth. And number two, someone who reveals details about the future. So this is what a prophet does. He reveals God's truth, and he also reveals details about the future. And that is who Abraham is. He is a prophet. He declares God's truth to his people, and he also sometimes gets insight about what's going to happen in the future. As we've seen here, when God tells him, your descendants are going to be 400 years in a foreign land, but then when the sins of the Amorites are full, then they're going to come back into the land and they're going to possess this land. And so God has given him insights into the future. There's something about Abraham that he didn't realize here, and that is that Abimelech and his people feared God. And unlike Egypt, which was a thoroughly pagan place with idols and things like that, evidently Abimelech and his people feared God. And Abraham didn't realize that. Verses 9 through 13. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us? What have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet she is indeed my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother. And so, number one, Abraham just assumed that Abimelech and his people did not fear God, did not fear Jehovah. And so he thought they would take his beautiful wife by force and kill him. So he instructed everyone to say, or Sarah to say, he is my brother, to Abimelech and all his people. But what we see here also is that a half lie is a whole lie. And so, yes, was she his half-sister? Yes. But the reason she was saying he is my brother and he was saying she is my sister is because he wanted to deceive them into believing a lie. And so you've got that a ninth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. That doesn't mean just I'm not going to tell a lie, straight out lie, but it also means we should not say something which would cause someone else to believe something which is not true. And that's, Elijah and I, we enjoy watching these politicians and these interviews on TV. And they'll ask them a straightforward question. And the answer they give, if you just believed what they said, would make you think this is correct. But in actuality, the other is correct. And the interviewer tries to nail them down. and the best thing to do, and I think what the American people respect, is when you're just honest and say, yeah, I did that, or yeah, I believe that. And this is the reason why I believe it, rather than trying to wiggle, which is what Abraham was trying to do. Say, well, she is my sister. Well, who cares? She's also your wife. And you should have told everybody, this is my wife. And you're not going to touch her. I don't care what you do to me. But he didn't. And so he disobeyed here, once again, like he did in Egypt. Well, in verses 14 through 18, Abimelech is generous to Abraham. It says, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants, women servants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. I wonder if that was meant in kind of an ironic way. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So you say, you're a brother. I'm giving your brother this money. She was reproved by him saying that. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech, and his wife, and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech, because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And so we see here some lessons. Abimelech was generous to Abraham, and the prophet Abraham prayed to God for Abimelech's family to be able to have children again. But one of the lessons we see here with Abimelech is this, and that is even sins that are committed in ignorance have serious consequences. And so we need to be praying. Before Abimelech took Sarah in, he should have been praying to God saying, is this your will? Show me if this is your will or not. And God could have answered before he took Sarah in and said, you know what? She's another man's wife. Don't have her. Don't take her. But he didn't. He took her in, and thankfully, because he feared God, God warned him after he took her in. But because he even took her in, the wombs of these people in this land were closed up, and they couldn't have any children, and God's judgment was upon them. And so ignorance is not an excuse. If you sin, there will be judgment from God to pay. You go down this road, 83 miles an hour, and you say, oh, I thought that little round sign was the speed limit. I can't read words, I just see numbers, And you think, Route 83 is a speed limit, one of these state boys, that's what you call them, right? They're going to pull you over, these state troopers. And they're going to say, I don't care what you thought. I'm going to give you a ticket because you were going 83 miles an hour in a 55 zone. And so just because you don't know you're doing wrong doesn't mean that you're not going to receive the judgment for it. So you need to pray for wisdom to do right and for God to lead you and guide you and to protect you from that which is sinful. And next time we'll go to chapter 21, and we're going to see the wonderful, glorious birth of Isaac.